Okay. Today we're going to start talking about one of the most famous heretics, Kofrim, in the Jewish in rabbinical times. A sort of a colleague of Rabbi Akiva. It was the teacher of Rabbi Meir, known as Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes, and his name was Elisha ben Avuya. Elisha ben Avuya was a great scholar, but at a certain point, the rabbis stopped calling him Elisha ben Avuya. They called him Aher, the other. To say he went so far to the other side that they wouldn't even use his name. Or some say that the reason they called him Aher is that a certain woman that he was talking to, she said, "You cannot be, Elisha ben Avuya. You must be another." Like she knew him as Elisha ben Avuya, but the way he spoke was so disrespectful. She couldn't, or unfitting for someone who was religious. She says, "You cannot be Elisha ben Avuya." Are you? And he said, "Yes, I am." And she still insisted. So he plucked a plant, say a radish, from the ground and gave it to her. It was on Shabbat. So she said, "Oh, Aheru, you're another person." So that's why they stuck with the name Other. That's one story.
What's the story of
the tree? I'm going to mention it. So the interesting thing about Elisha ben Avuya, as I said, he became a heretic. Or the rabbis said about him that he was a kofer, that he went to the other side, and they were all trying to figure out what happened. How is it possible that someone who was so deeply engaged in study, in learning, and at a certain point, a colleague of Rabbi Akiva, they said that he was one of the four who entered the orchard of the divine wisdom, meaning he studied mysticism, was a very high level of learning and understanding. How does he become a kofir? How does he become a heretic that doesn't believe in God or doesn't believe in certain aspects of the Torah? So there seem to be contradicting stories. One story is this, and he says himself the story to Rabbi Meir when they have an exchange, and he tells him this: Avuya Abba Migdolei Yerushalayim Haya. And how did he says, my father was one of the great an important person in Yerushalayim. How did he come to the point of telling Rabbi Meir the story? We have this: Rabbi Meir היה יושב ודורש בבית המדרש בטבריה, והיה אלישע רבו מטייל בשוק כשהוא רוכב על סוסו בשבת. So Rabbi Meir is sitting in the Beit HaMidrash and teaching. It's on Shabbat. It's in Tveria. And people come and say, your rabbi, your master, Elisha ben Avuya, is riding his horse back and forth like on the main street on Shabbat. Right. The provocation. Yeah. So they came and told him, "Ifsik drashato v'yatza elav." So for Rabbi Meir, it was more important to go talk to his rabbi, even though he already became what they considered a heretic, than continuing the drasha, because he always believed that he could bring him back. אמר לו אלישע, מה היית דורש היום? אמר לו, ואדוני ברך את אחרית איוב מראשיתו. Elisha said, what were you discussing today? What is the topic of your speech or your class? And this for the rabbis in Talmudic times, this is how you strike a conversation. You always say, Psok li psukcha, give me a verse. What are you talking about? Well, today we do it with the weather, right? What's the weather? It's nice, it's warm, will be tomorrow. Back then it was, give me a pasuk, let's talk about the pasuk. So he says, what were you talking about? He says, I was talking about Job. And the pasuk at the end of the book of Job says, Vadonai berach et hacharit Eov mereshito. God blessed Eov at the end more than he had in the beginning. Amar lo uma amarta bo. So he says, okay, that's the pasuk. What did you say about the pasuk, about the verse? He says, Vayosef Adonai et kol asher Eov lemishne, shekafal lo et kol mamono. God gave Eov double of what he lost. Of course, there's the pending question of Eov had 7 children who were killed. You can never replace that. You cannot replace one person. So many scholars believe or say that Eov's children were never killed. His possessions were taken, burned, captured, whatever, but his children didn't die. He was told that they died, but in reality they were alive and well until his ordeal was over. Then it was revealed to him, and that's why it says Vayilo Shiv'ana Banim V'Shalosh Banot. He had, not that new children were born, and it would make much more sense than to say that the story says, than to think that according to the story God took away the lives of his children to give him other children. Doesn't make sense. In any case, Rabbi Meir says, this is how I explain it. God doubled Iyov's possessions. So Elisha tells him, Haval ala ovdim ve'enan nimtzeim. Vay al de'avdin ve'lam mishtakehin. He says, I feel bad that, that we lost such great people. We don't have anyone like them anymore. And it's criticism. He says, Akiva rabbecha lo haya omer kach. He says, your other master, he says, he's his master, but he says, like, your other Rabbi Akiva would not say the same. Or in other words, he says, I wish that Rabbi Akiva were here. You're not good enough. So he's almost insulting him. Ela v'Adonai berach et hacharit Iyov mereshito. He reads the word from the beginning, not as a description of time, like more than what he had in the beginning, but rather as a cause. It says, God blessed Iyov at the end because he was good from the beginning. Meaning, if someone starts on a good course, then he has a chance to end well. But when the beginning is wrong and misdirected, then everything will follow at the same direction. And then Elisha applies it to his own life. So the whole reason here, we don't know if it's really happened that way, or the Midrash puts the story, creates this dialogue with the specific verse that was perfect for Elisha to speak about. But that's for him an opening to tell his story. He says, Bi'aya Maaseh. He says, this is my story. Like if you're wondering why I got to where I got, he says, Avuya Abba, Migdolei Yerushalayim Haya. My father was one of the important people in Yerushalayim, and when I was born and they had the Brit Milah, he called all the great, the important people in Yerushalayim and the rabbis, and they all got there. כשאכלו ושתו, התחילו מטפחים ורקדים. אלו אומרים מזמורים, ואלו אומרים אלפי בתרים. So once they ate and they drank, they were happy, they started singing and dancing, and some of them read psalms, and some say alfe betarim, meaning psalms that go by by alphabetical order. This is still a nice celebration. It's still with religious flavor, but for Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, it was not enough. He says, "Elu oskim b'Torah, v'anu iyanu oskim b'shalom." They say, we have to celebrate the way we know. Let us study Torah, and they sat together and they studied with the intention and dedication, and it was of such high level that at a certain point, fire came down from heaven and surrounded them, and it was almost like the giving of the law in Har Sinai. So Avuya, Elisha's father, says, "What you're trying to set the house on fire? What are you doing?" So they say, "No, we're just studying Torah, and this is a divine fire that just as a result of our learning." And he says, "Ho'il v'kach gadol kocha shel Torah, haben hazeh im yitkayem li harini mafrisho leTorah." So his father said, "Wow, I didn't know that is the merit or the thing that you could achieve when you study Torah. This son, I will." He says, if he survives, because back then they didn't know if a child will survive past childhood. He says, if he survives, he will be dedicated to the study of Torah, and that's how it was. So Elisha says, "Lefi shelo hayta kavanat machashavto l'shem shamayim lo nitkama b'torati," because his intention from the beginning was not pure. It was for the sake of honor and glory. It didn't work out. That's one story. But there's another story, the one that Sammy mentioned. It says, "Ma ra'a aher sheyatza letarbut ra'a." What caused him to go into this what they call bad culture or off the path? Amru, there are different stories. It says, פעם אחת היה יושב ושונה בבקעת גינוסר, וראה אדם אחד שעלה לראש הדקל בשבת, ונטל האם על הבנים וירד בשלום. So the Torah says that ki karek en tzipor lefanecha, if you see a nesting bird and you want to take the bird to eat, of course, shaleach tishalach et ha'em v'et habanim tikach lach. Don't destroy the whole family. Let the mother go and just take the fledglings or the eggs. It's not an obligation. You don't have to take the eggs or the fledglings. It means if you need them, if you need it, like as a hunter, just take some of it and spare the family. Let the mother go. And if you do that, you'll have long life. So he sees a man climbing the palm tree on Shabbat and bringing down the nest, the bird with the fledglings, and he goes home and everything is fine. He says, "Where's the punishment? God should have punished him." Then another time he sits and he sees a father and a son walking, and the father tells the son, "Oh, I see a nest on top of the tree. Would you go up and get it for me to fulfill the mitzvah? We want to let the bird fly and just take the eggs." And the son went and climbed, and he fell and got killed. So Elisha says, "Why? This I don't understand. The transgressor survived and everything was fine, and this child who performed two mitzvot, kibud avayim, he honored his father, and is doing shiluach haken, which for both the Torah says lema'an yitav lach v'arachta yamim. The Torah says clearly that the reward for both mitzvot is long life. Yet he's killed when he does that. So there's no justice. This is the famous question of theodicy. Why do good people suffer, and bad people or evildoers enjoy their life and everything is prosperous? So what was the real reason? Was it because he saw that incident, or because his father had impure intentions when he dedicated him for the study of Torah? Then no, there's a third story that is maybe a later story, esoteric, but more about mysticism, that said that Elisha was one of the four people who entered with Rabbi Akiva the orchard of divine wisdom, meaning that they studied the very deep level of Jewish spirituality and mysticism, and it's today we would describe it as meditation. That a person meditates until he gets to a point of that his consciousness or his awareness and the universe is one. And that is a very dangerous state, because when we are in a state of awareness, there's a certain barrier in our mind that tells us, like sets the boundaries. It tells us, you end here and the world starts here. It seems we take it for granted that we know exactly, this is me, this is the table, this is another person, but it's not so simple. There's a program in our mind that says, okay, end of you, beginning of the rest, right? And when people meditate or they do or they study mysticism at very deep levels, this barrier is gone, and this is what people call to be at one with the universe, and they have a higher level of awareness. It's some people describe it as like three-dimensional vision, meaning they look at an object and they can see it as if they're surrounding it and seeing it from all sides. And it's in a way you could say it's sort of a bliss of undescribable joy. And the problem with that state of mind is that it's so good you don't want to come back. And that's why yes, and it's recommended for people who meditate at very high levels to do it with a guide in the beginning who could sort of like snap them back and bring them to reality. And the other thing that it could cause is it could cause death. It could cause people to go insane, because they're like rewiring their brain, and it doesn't work. Which, by the way, could happen also to people who study. I think there are several cases like that of people who study theoretical mathematics, which, in a way, they're trying to understand infinity and squeeze it into a finite brain. So they have to open those boundaries, and then they lose something. So two of the four people who went into the orchard with Rabbi Akiva, Ben Azai and Ben Zoma, this is what happened to them. One of them went insane, and the other one died. Elisha ben Avuya, they say, Kitzitz b'netiot. His reaction was to say kitzatz b'neti'ot meaning to cut the orchard down. It's destructive. That what he came out with the conclusion, he was able to go in and come out, meaning to meditate and to come back to reality. But when he came back to reality, instead of understanding what Rabbi Akiva understood, that when you are one with the universe, it means there's one power, one deity or entity that powers everything. He saw each entity as separate. He says, "Shtei rashuyoten." There's one God or one divine force that runs everything positive, and one who runs all the negative things. Like later on in Christianity, when they believe that the devil is God's adversary. So now we have three stories: one about his childhood, one about the incident of the kid who was killed at a young age, and one about that. But probably each one of them gives us one aspect of his personality, and it all starts with the beginning, and that is the issue. In another place we have Hachamim say, and we find Pirkei Avot, לעולם מי האדם עוסק בתורה שלו לשמה, שמתוך שלא לשמה בא לשמה. It's good to study Torah, even if it's not for the right purpose, because the knowledge of Torah by itself is going to change you. So even if one studies in order to become a rabbi or in order to hold a position or to be respected by others, it's still good, because once he goes through in most cases, when he goes through the learning and the text, he will be transformed. They also say, and Rabbi ben Pakuda, who wrote the book Hovot HaLevavot, the duties of the hearts in medieval Spain, he says, "Harei ha'pe'olot yimashchu ha'levavot." When you perform a good act, let's say you help other people, you give charity, you go and take care of the poor or the needy, eventually it will affect you. Even if you do it just because you were told it's good and you don't think it's good, eventually it will affect you. So why didn't it affect Elisha ben Avuya? Even if his father, and in this case he didn't have any intentions, it was his father who directed him there. So that shows us how powerful is a kid's education. If Elisha at a certain point would choose on his own to study or to do something, and would do it maybe for the wrong reasons, he could have still have the option to be corrected. But because his father from the beginning directed him, says, you have to do this in order to get this high position, or in order to get this high merit. So his education was destroyed from the beginning. He was never able to break out of it. So as a result, when at a certain point in life he had a reason to cast doubt on what he knew, he grabbed onto it. Meaning that was not the reason. When he saw the man who he thought was not punished, or the kid who was punished, for him was the catalyst. The seeds were already there. It just gave the final push for him to go overboard. And that's the same thing that he saw when he entered the Pardes, the orchard of divine wisdom. It was just for him the justification to say, I've known all along that maybe the merit or the reward that I searched for in the Torah is not there, and therefore I allow myself to cross to the other side. So this is just the beginning of the story. It's a long discussion of Elisha ben Avuya. Will continue tomorrow, B'ezrat Hashem. But we've learned from here how important it is that our education to the children starts on the right path with the pure intention. Baruch Adonai, le'olam amen.